Hi there, Tom here again with our Squier 77 vintage modified jazz bass. Quite a mouthful there. I believe it's also maybe a vintage modified 77 jazz bass. I'm not sure exactly, but we picked up this little gem from a local pawn shop in this lovely amber finish. Kind of an orange to it even, kind of really quite nice. It's a 2016 model. They've since been replaced with the 70s Classic Vibe series. But this is really quite a lovely instrument. Got a very good deal on it. Picked it up because my daughter was taking her Fender Precision to school to use, and I just was very nervous about that. It was like maybe a slightly less expensive instrument would be a better option. So we picked this one up and went through a few steps to get it up to par. I've had a feeling it was probably gigged. It has sweat corrosion on the bridge that had to be replaced. It was really kind of disgusting, crusty, which gives it something of a secret history. I'd love to know where it was played, who it was played by. It'd be very interesting to find out. But to see how we got this sucker up to specs, stick around and follow along with the steps at a tip. Let's get started with the crusty bridge. First, we'll take out the screws to get it off there. The Squier brand was initially a manufacturer of guitar strings, but sometime in the mid-60s it was purchased by Fender and eventually was phased out in favor of Fender strings sometime in the 70s. As you can see, this bridge was very rusty and crusty, which leads me to believe it was actually gigged. Someone sweated furiously, and over time it attacked the metal of the bridge. Here's our replacement. It's quite nice for, I think it was $40, $35 on Amazon. But it's got a nice heavy construction and no sharp edges. Make sure the screws are tight, but don't strip them. The screws on an instrument are subjected to quite a lot of vibration, so you want to make sure they're tight because they will tend to loosen themselves over time. Aside from the rusty bridge, the bass appears to be well taken care of with the finish in quite good shape. The neck's very nice, and honestly the fretboard's fairly clean, as like it was actually kept fairly well. So moving on to the fretboard now. The neck was very clean, didn't appear to have too many high frets, so I cleaned it up some, little wax and polish here before taping it off so we can begin the fret polishing with the fret erasers. Remember, always detack any tape you're going to use on a guitar anywhere. Masking tape will rip the finish off of a guitar. A maple fretboard, rosewood, it does not matter. Masking tape is way stickier than people give it credit for. We start with a 180 grit to remove the heaviest corrosion. We proceed at a 30 to 45 degree angle and rub the fret along both sides. And a little polish across the top. Next we'll move to the 400 grit. Again at a 30 to 45 degree angle to the frets. Basically polishing any rough edges, getting off any corrosion. And lastly we move to the 1000, which is just a polishing basically. I'm a big fan of the fret erasers because they make it really hard to damage the frets. Being rubber, they shape to it. They don't take off too much material unless you really work at them too hard. It's a really nice way to get your fretboard polished up and up to shape. So I cheated a little bit here and got a nice shiny new control plate, which already has the holes pre-sized for the American components. I pre-soldered the capacitor and the ground lugs on the potentiometers before we started to assemble. So take them and mount them to the new control plate. Fender revived the Squier brand sometime in the early 80s to help fight against the influx of cheap Asian guitars that were actually very high quality. So if you can't beat them, join them. Alright, upgrading all the pots on this bass because actually I really kind of like it. It's kind of a keeper. So it originally came with alpha pots, which are fine quality, but might as well go all the way and put the nice American new stuff on here. Get some new knobs and the whole 9 yards. Okay, get everything installed, including the new switchcraft jack. Being careful to make sure the washers are the correct positioning so they have the locking effect. And also you want the shiny side of the washer if it has one, just for appearance's sake. Okay, get everything screwed down. Make sure everything's positioned straight. And we'll take the, bend everything to give it a little extra clearance here and there for the soldering before we actually lock the stuff down. You want to make sure to get a very secure connection, as in the lock plate, actually the control plate provides the ground for everything. And it's silly to use ground wires on something that has a central ground such as this control plate. I kind of think it's funny when people are like, oh, if you're having problems, run grounds. But after working on cars for years, trust me, a giant piece of chrome metal is a much better conductor than a 22 gauge piece of nickel chrome wire. It's just or a piece of copper. It's amazing. Okay, we'll do a little more off-camera pre-soldering with the hot leads. All right, let's go ahead and get the old control plate off and take out the screws. Okay, we'll go ahead and get it up out of here, being careful not to scratch the guitar. Place it off to the side to get ready to solder. I like to use the soldering clips on the board to help hold the wires in place. That way you don't have to grab a hot wire and pull on it, or use a pair of pliers, which are kind of ungainly when you're soldering. So here we're disconnecting the pickups. And next we'll disconnect the grounds. So move the clips. And here we go. Here's a good case for making sure you use a well tin soldering iron. It can take much longer than necessary to desolder something when the iron isn't quite hot enough. So a good clean, well tinned iron makes your job a lot easier. All right, here's the new control plate in place. Here I'm soldering all of the consolidated grounds. I like to run all the grounds on a base like this to the actual output jack. In this case though, the pickup lead for the neck pickup wasn't long enough, so we went ahead and soldered them to the pots like they were originally. Shouldn't make a difference to tone, but there you go. Put a little pool of solder and get the ground in there. Make sure to hold it long enough. Cold solder joints are bad. That one looked like a cold joint, so we gave it a little more heat and a touch more solder. But please don't overheat pots or capacitors. You can ruin them pretty easily. And right here we had something of a loose, maybe not complete joint, so another hit with the soldering iron and a little more solder to make sure it's a good solid connection. And there we go. All right. Move to installing this, but in figures the control plate doesn't quite line up, so we use the old toothpick trick. Take a toothpick, break it, use some good wood glue, put a fair amount in the actual hole, and stuff the toothpick in after you get some glue in there, and break it off. Okay, do the same for the other. Luckily the one hole still lined up, so get any excess glue off. You really kind of want to put the screw in if the hole's large like they were in this case while the glue's still a little wet, so that everything can kind of flow out and give you a new grip for whatnot. So here we go, installing the new screws. I like to use a good small screwdriver bit to do this, a double-aught or a double zero or zero. Make sure it's new, isn't all chipped up and torn up at the end. They can slip easily and damage the guitar. So maintain a firm grip. Make sure you're screwing into it without actually over torquing. All right, after the screws are all in, a quick check to make sure that the electronics were actually functioning, and tighten up the screws on the pig guard. Like I said, basses tend to vibrate quite a bit. These screws come loose. It's a good idea every time you change the strings, check all the screws. Just go around it with a screwdriver, make sure everything stays tight. All right, here's our new knobs. They're more standard. Some people may cry sacrilege and think I should have used some of the Stratocaster knobs, but no, these were pretty cheap, so I went with these. They fit on the new 1/4-inch pots quite nice and make it look like any other jazz bass, which, like I said, may be a crime to some people, but Oh well. First, we'll adjust our neck relief. We'll begin by installing the capo at the first fret. And after you get the capo at the first fret, go to the body joint or the last fret, depending on who you listen to. I don't know. And get a feeler gauge out. If you don't have a feeler gauge, you can use a business card. It's approximately 12 thousandths. And measure the gauge. It should fit in there without moving the string or having a big gap between the string and the feeler gauge. Okay, here we had a bit of a gap, so we will need to adjust the truss rod slightly. It'll need to be tightened, so you want to loosen the tension off some of the strings to give you room to work. Insert the truss rod wrench tightly, squarely, and tighten it. If it feels like it doesn't want to turn, don't force it. It could be turned all the way. Okay, check your height again. This appears to be pretty good. I may have had to adjust it twice. I don't recall. I actually did this a little while back, but after you get it to between 0.012 to 0.020, move on to checking your string height. Okay, the strings were actually very low. They needed to be raised, so kind of hard to show. But with a string height gauge, you position it, kind of look. You want to see where the bottom of the string lines up with the top of the numbered blocks on the gauge. So here we're raising up our saddles to get a correct string height. You want to set your string height because strings that are set too low will buzz against the fretboard, or if they're too high, it makes the guitar very hard to play. So we check again to see where our height is. Getting better. May need to raise it up just a little more. If you play slap, you'll probably want to set your strings a little higher, say greater than 1/10 of an inch. If not, a little lower, say 0.08 or 0.09 for the E string, and maybe 0.8 for the G string. So, all right, we're finally getting to about where we want to be here. All right, turns out the other end of the bass was set a little too high, so we'll lower those back down just a hair. Okay, now we'll set the intonation. It's really quite simple. You just need a tuner. Play the open string, get it into tune at E, and then you hold the guitar at the 12th fret, play the note again, notice whether it is flat or sharp, and adjust the string accordingly. Then adjust your saddle positioning accordingly, making the string longer or shorter, tune it back up, and try it again. When it's in tune at both the 12th fret and open, your intonation is set. Repeat across all 4 strings, and you're done. Okay, time to hear the final product. Don't forget to like and subscribe.